Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining in. So our today's session, we're going to look at how do we improve our English if someone's planning to do an LLM. So first of all, welcome all of you. How many of you are planning to do an LLM? Quick check maybe. Okay, you can also put your answers in the chat box, whoever is planning to do their LLM. All right, that's great. That's great. So have you guys started your preparation, or you will be doing it in a while, maybe after a couple of years? You can keep letting me know in the chat box. Also, a brief introduction about myself. I am Vanita Bhatnagar. I work as a legal editor at LawSikho. My primary tasks are to look at students' articles, mentor them, and get their work published across different platforms. All right. So I see most of you are in the phase where you're thinking about it, and some of you have started preparing, and some of you are still waiting to start full on it. Correct? All right. Okay. So what we're going to look at in today's session is that, first of all, I'm going to take you through different tests. Now, depending upon the university that you're applying for, all right, every university have their own criteria. So depending on the university that you're applying for, you're required to give various tests. Okay, there are two which are most common. I'm going to speak about those two in today's class. That is, number one is IELTS, the other is TOEFL. We're going to look at how are these tests conducted, what are the different sections that are covered, how we will also, by the end of the session, we will also devise a strategy as to what are the different steps that you can incorporate in your daily life to improve so that you are able to successfully appear for this test. On the very start, I want to make this thing very clear that these tests are not that difficult. All right. I mean, if you've already studied in an English medium school from the very beginning, it is slightly more easier for you. But however, let's say if you're from a vernacular medium, or if you are from any other medium, okay, and English was not taught as a part of your school, then maybe there could be slight challenges. However, nothing to worry about. If you follow what we will discuss today, that will enable you to effectively sit for these tests. All right. Now, before I start, are you guys aware about both the test, IELTS and the TOEFL, that I'm speaking about? If anybody who's not aware, you can let me know. All right. Okay, great. So you guys are aware about that. Wonderful. So IELTS, so first I'll start with the IELTS format. Okay. So now these are the tests that are given when you are applying for an LLM abroad. Right? These are applicable to whatever score that you get in these tests. It is, you can use that score for whichever university that you're sitting. Okay. Now in IELTS, there are again two types. One is your academic and the another is general training. So mostly when you're applying for your LLM, you give the academic test. All right. However, the key components for both these tests are with respect to your listening and speaking abilities. Okay, these are common to both the tests that we spoke about, right? However, the subject matter for reading and writing sections, they may differ depending upon which one are you writing. Okay, so if you're taking the academic, the subject matter when it comes to reading will be different, and if you're applying for the general training, then it's going to be different, right? However, your listening and your speaking are similar for both, right? So there are four. So we spoke about four things that come under your test. Okay. Now starting from your listening. Okay. So how does the test format look like? So first is your listening. So they test your listening abilities, right? So you will be required to listen to 4 recordings of native English speakers. All right. So since all of us are non-native English speakers, it is very important for us that we are able to grasp the accent of the other, so whichever they are playing, right? So specifically, let's say if you are applying for an LLM in Europe, all right, there are 3 major accents that are there: Irish, Scottish, and English. So a fair amount of knowledge. So we all are primarily familiar with the US accent because we watch a lot of US shows. So we are more familiar with that accent. However, we might not be very comfortable if we hear Australian accent, Scottish accent, right? So for improving your listening abilities, it is important that you familiarize yourself to different accents. And so what you can do for that is probably listen a podcast in different accents and watch YouTube videos. You can also watch a lot of movies, right, in a different accent. Because in your test, 30 minutes are specifically given to your listening, right? Your listening abilities are judged. Uh, there will be 4 recordings that will be given to you. Uh, Recording 1 will have a conversation between the 2 people. They will be having a conversation in an everyday social context. Okay, so you are expected to hear the recording, and there will be a couple of questions that will follow that you're required to answer. There will be, so currently I'm only giving you an introduction about the 2 tests, okay, IELTS and TOEFL. There's another that is also conducted, that is Pearson, right? But I'm discussing only these 2 here. And after I have mentioned about these tests, I'm going to talk about the different strategies that you can adopt, right? So first, we spoke about there's going to be recordings, right? So one is a conversation between 2 people that is set in an everyday context. The another recording is with respect to a monologue that is set again in an everyday social context. Okay, it could be a speech about local facilities, maybe. Then there is a conversation that happens between 4 to 5 people. Okay, and this is probably done in an educational context. Okay, like for example, a university tutor is explaining a particular concept and students are asking doubts, right? So all the recordings are different from each other, right? Then your last recording, that is recording 4, that has a monologue again. Okay, that will be on an academic subject. Okay, could be anything depending upon for whichever university. It could be anything, right? So this is the format. Now what happens is that there are 2 parts that you have to deal with. Okay, so in part 1, like we spoke, right, there was a conversation between the 2 speakers. It could be with respect to travel arrangements, and like we spoke about that in part 2, there is a monologue, right? Now you will be able to hear these recordings only once. Okay, and largely the accents could be British, Australian, New Zealand, American, or Canadian. The important aspect is that while you're listening to these recordings, you start taking notes there and then. Okay, because you can only hear them once. You cannot just keep coming back to them, and whatever the different questions that you will have will be based on the recordings that you have heard. Okay, so even for TOEFL, this is similar. Okay, even in TOEFL, your listening, reading, speaking, and writing abilities are tested. And listening works very similar to what we are discussing right now. Okay. So there would be another would be listening in detail, where you're given a multiple choice questions. Okay. So you'll have to pick from options A, B, C, D. Okay. The other could be matching. So, you'll probably be given one statement, and then you'll have to identify in which context was this given. Okay, so you'll have 2 different settings, and you'll have to match the correct, you'll have to assess and then match the correct option with the relevant option. Okay, another could be that you may be expected to make a note out of the conversation, or write a summary to what you just heard. So what is important here is that your listening abilities needs to be on point, as well as your comprehension ability. Okay, so even if both these things work hand in hand, then only you will be able to solve these questions. Otherwise, you will face a major roadblock. So a lot of time when students are trying to learn through videos, okay, maybe through YouTube videos or watching movies, you can do a small exercise. Maybe at the end of it, you can have questions and ask yourself, okay, do I understand in what context was this conversation made? Was I able to understand what is a larger, or what is the impact of the conversation that the 2 people were having, right? So with your listening abilities, okay, one is that you're able to understand, the other is that you're also able to comprehend and answer the questions that might flow from it. Another very important element while giving this test is timing. Okay, so you need, so every time you're taking an exercise, I'm sure before you write these exams you'll be taking a couple of sample tests as well. So when you're solving these question papers, sample questions paper, ensure that you're keeping a tab of a time. Okay, keeping a tab of a time is important because these are time based tests. So for listening you only get 30 minutes, right? So practice, ensure that you're practicing keeping the time in mind. All right, another could also be sentence completion. So maybe this is all I'm discussing with respect to the listening exercise that's given to you. So maybe, you know, they'll write a sentence and they ask you to complete from whatever you've heard the conversation above, right? So important is that you're able to remember. So while you can keep making your notes. All right, you can also do it in your own mother tongue if you wish. The important point is that at the time of answering the question you should be able to recall the conversation, right? There are also short answer questions. That is also one format. Okay, now here the focus is on sentence completion, on the ability to listen for concrete facts. Okay, such as, do you remember at what place were they making this conversation, or maybe at what time did this conversation took place, right? So this is you need to pay attention to all these small details when you're listening to that conversation. All right, and number of questions in all these are variable. Okay, you can have like 2 questions on each of them, maybe 4 or 5. That's not, there's no fixed number on it. Okay, so these are with respect to listening. Okay, similarly you have it when it comes to academic reading. Now here academic reading is paced for 60 minutes. Okay, and it consists of basically 40 questions that are designed to test different skills, different types of your reading skills, which will include how well are you able to read gist, how well are you able to capture the main idea of the discussion, how well are you able to read in detail. Okay, your skimming, how well are you able to skim through the document, are you able to follow the logical argument that's been made, are you able to recognize what is the opinion of the writer that is being put forward, okay, or any kind of attitude or purpose that's been declared within the context of the discussion, right? Now so for reading there are passages, okay, and there are variety of questions that can be given. Okay, and again this is time based. You have 60 minutes to finish it. There are 40 questions. uh, there will be multiple choice question. There'll be identifying information, identifying the writer's view, matching the information, matching correct headings, matching sentence ending, sentence completion. All of these different types of questions that are asked. Okay, and each of the questions carry 1 mark here. Okay, now the test takers are required to transfer their answers to an answer sheet during the time that is allowed. So you'll have to read and then quickly solve your exercises there and then, right? So this is academic reading, that is description wise. Now there's another that happens, that is academic reading in detail. Okay, here also you have multiple choice questions. All right, then again you have to identify the information. Now these are variable. Okay, these different types are variable. You might also be required to identify the writer's views or claim. What is that the author is trying to make, what is the author's opinion in that particular case. You'll also be required to maybe match the information, something very similar what we also addressed in the listening aspect, right? These are similar. Okay, sentence completion, similar as to what you had in your listening section as well. Another is to write a summary or a note or a table chart. Okay, now this is again variable. There are no specified number of questions. You might have like 10 maybe on completion of sentence and maybe just 2 on writing a summary. So that's variable. Okay, there's no fixed pattern with respect to that. Okay, so now I will be discussing TOEFL. TOEFL is also very similar to this. Okay, I will focus more on the strategies now. And score is dependent upon, see, basically your TOEFL is for 120 pointers and divided into reading, listening, speaking, and writing. So you scored from 0 to 30 in each of these sections. So these are the 4 sections, and in every section there is a score from 0 to 30. a good score would be something around probably 22 in each of these categories. That's considered a good score. All right, that's the range that you rely on. You can also, test your abilities maybe in terms of speaking. Okay, so maybe you can time yourself every time you taking a speaking test, or you can also, when you are typing, you can also take your typing test, because mostly you'll be working on a QWERTY laptop, right? When you'll be answering these questions, you will not be doing it on paper and pen, and therefore your speed of typing will matter. How well are you able to write and answer and are able to answer these questions? Okay, so that is important. Now I will be addressing the strategies, but before that I would like to take up your questions. Okay. Yeah, so Satyendra, we were discussing IELTS and TOEFL tests, so which most of the students write when they're preparing for the LLM. I was just giving an overview of these tests to our students. How to improve your vocabulary, I'm going to come down to it. I will be discussing this as a strategy. No, you're not supposed to give these tests if you're pursuing LLM from India. Now, these are only particularly when you're planning to do an LLM from abroad, okay? Because then you have to give a exam which tests your foreign language. All right, so this is only about only when, so these tests you write, IELTS and TOEFL, only when you're sitting for an exam in a foreign country, okay? When you want to go to a foreign country, not when you're writing in India, right? Suruchi is asking, does this exam contain something in relation to that? So these tests only check your English proficiency. Okay, they are only examining how good your English language is, because we are non-native speakers of English, right? English is not our native language. So before we start, before we apply for an educational degree abroad, okay, they try and check your English comprehension, listening and speaking abilities. Okay, so therefore you're required to give these exams. Shivani is asking that, is it necessary to learn legal English? Not for these tests, okay? Maybe in your academic writing, you might have a comprehension that is abundantly on testing your legal English. That might happen, but not necessarily. Okay, so you will not be tested on your idioms and all of that. In foreign countries, which country is the best to do LLM? So Hirika, this is a very subjective question. Okay, it depends upon your interest. It depends upon on which field you are wanting to pursue your LLM. I mean, there cannot be a blanket answer to it. It also depends upon how much are you willing to invest. Okay, so all of these are dependent on a multiple factors, right? What is your objective? Whether you're, if you're trying to, if you're planning to do an LLM in corporate laws, there are different universities for that. If you're trying to pursue an LLM in, let's say, arbitration law, then there would be a separate university for that. Okay. That's correct. That's correct, Utkarsh. So these tests, IELTS and TOEFL, these are separate from your main test. Okay. So your main test is your LLM exams that you'll be writing for the university. That paper will be different. So sometimes what happens is, mostly in most cases, okay, there is no LLM exam as such. Okay, you only have to apply. You just have to put forward your application to showcase your interest that you would want to pursue your LLM from this university. Along with that, you have to disclose your IELTS or TOEFL score. Okay. So while you're making the application, you're required to put these scores in that. That is where you will be required to give these tests. Okay. Again, Yojit, I think this will be out of context discussion, that whether what are the opportunities of doing LLM abroad and whether you should come back to India. This will be out of the discussion from today's topic. We are only looking at how we can improve our English. All right, if you're planning to do an LLM from abroad, okay, that is what we're trying to look in today's session. All right. Any further questions on that? If not, then I think we can start with our strategies part. Okay. So there are board centers, okay, that conduct your IELTS and TOEFL tests. Okay. So first, I'm going to talk about TOEFL. What are the strategies that you can adopt? Okay, so first and foremost, you need to become a good note taker. Okay, so what happens during your TOEFL or IELTS is that you only get to listen the audio clips once, right? As I have mentioned. Now you will then need to answer questions or maybe speak or write on that subject that you heard about. Now, because you cannot replay the audio, you need to become good in taking your notes. Right now you can practice. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that you should practice taking notes in your everyday life as well. If you're because see, at exam, finally how you're answering these questions will largely be dependent on how well you have taken the notes or how well you're able to remember the information that you heard, right? So either you can practice taking notes, you can take these sample exams and check, if you're able to remember what you just heard or how efficiently are you taking the points down. Because see, you cannot write everything that was said in the conversation. That will not be possible for you to do, right? So you need to write briefly but also be able to understand when you have to answer the questions that will follow. Okay. You can also, while practicing, you should try with variety of different audio clips of different lengths and levels of complexity. So do not try and restrict yourself to only one type. Now, meaning probably you're just practicing with videos that follow Australian accent. Okay, that will not help. You should try with different accents. Okay, the audio clips, different audio clips. You should also practice with different lengths, and also the complexity of matter is also essential. So maybe sometimes you want to look at maybe a discussion that is happening on a judicial subject, okay, on a legal subject maybe, and then maybe you want to listen to another recording wherein they are discussing negotiation of a particular contract. Okay, so try different types of audio recordings that you're practicing to. Okay, do not restrict themselves to one type only. Okay, then pay attention to things that may seem elementary, like the layout of your notes and the eligibility of your handwriting. Because if you're not able to understand your own writing at that point, your taking notes will not be helpful, right? So you need to be careful about whatever the way you're writing. Okay, if you're making charts, tables, whatever, you should be able to comprehend it, right? So if you're able to take down notes very confidently and record all the important pieces of information that was discussed in these conversation, that will be of immense help while writing your text. Okay, and also, this habit will also help you in future, be it with respect to whether you're participating in a client meeting. Okay, so if you are in a client meeting and if you're able to take down notes very intelligently, that will always help you to you'll have something to fall back on. Okay, so ensure that you experiment and you devise ways so that you're able to take down notes very efficiently. Okay, another thing is that you need to take practice tests. Okay, so when you're preparing for TOEFL or IELTS, you're always aiming for a specific score. Okay, and that would be given by your university, that okay, you know what, for being eligible at this university, you require your minimum IELTS or TOEFL score needs to be XYZ, right? So since that is very clear in your head, and let's say for one of the universities that you're planning to apply for, they require a higher TOEFL or IELTS score, then in that case it is very important that you're taking more number of practice tests. You're keeping the time element in mind. Okay, so because this is going to vary from university to university that you're applying, your methodology also needs to keep evolving, right? So ensure that you are very clear as to what is the score that is expected out of you, and accordingly you start practicing. Okay, next thing is that you need to read every day. So I think this one is despite the fact that whether you're preparing for LLM or not. Okay, I think being a lawyer, it is critical for all of us to read every day, and not just one type of reading. So a lot of times when I interact with students and when I see their articles are heavily written in legal language. Uh, Not even legal language to say, I mean, it's all academic. And why do they rely on the academic language? Because that is what they have read in the law books. And their writing style is entirely based on the kind of language that they're reading. So, what I would like to recommend here is that try and read various authors. Don't restrict yourself to only one kind of reading. So there needs to be you should also be reading business news, okay, different business magazines. You should also be reading authors from different communities, okay. So do not always restrict yourself to reading American authors. You should also experiment with maybe somebody from China, somebody from Spain, somebody from France. Okay, so keep the pool of what you're reading very diverse. That will help you, number one, in understanding the kind of words that they use. They will also make you acquainted with the kind of vocabulary that these people are using. Okay, now this is specifically very relevant when you're applying for a LLM to a particular country. Okay, so let's say I want to go to France and I want to do my LLM from France, for example. Okay, so not just for the purpose of obtaining my IELTS or to TOEFL score, but also tomorrow I have to start staying at that place, right? And even when I am speaking in English in that community, I should be aware about the kind of words that they are using, right? So therefore, whichever country you're planning to go, ensure that you're getting yourself acquainted with their vocabulary, okay, their accent, of course. So if you're up, even if we talk about Europe, there are multiple accents that people use. Even if we talk about Australia, from different parts, like, it varies. So you get a hang of this, okay, you get a hang of accents, and you also get a hang of the kind of words that they use. So even if we talk about New Zealand and Australia, okay, they have very different kind of vocabulary, right? So pick on those. That will be very helpful, right? So for that, what you can do is you can also read a lot of books that are in different language. Similarly for Canada also, okay, you want to you want to understand their colloquial language. Now for understanding their colloquial language, it is important, maybe you're watching videos on YouTube, okay, that are by primarily limited to that region, Canada region. You're also listening to watching movies, maybe, okay, not just American movies, but something made by Canada as well. And also authors, okay, you're reading Canadian authors. What is a major restriction with us is that we by and large restrict ourselves to US only. Okay, we are only exposed to American culture. We are not exposed to reading European authors or watching European movies. It's very limited. I mean, we watch few, but it's limited. So if you see the kind of words that they use, even for meet and greet or just say thank you, okay, those are also very different. All right. So for instance, in India, you will see somebody just saying, it's all right, okay, if you've not done, it's all right. In Australia, people would instead say no worries. So for simple terms also, there is different vocab that people use. So it's important that before you actually move to a different country altogether, you get yourself acquainted with all of these things. All right. The next thing is that you listen to podcasts. So again, very similar to reading. So what you can do here is you can listen to a lot of news items, particularly BBC. All right. That's one very important thing that you can subscribe to. And all of these podcasts are very freely available on your Spotify. Okay. So you can explore that option. Now, what happens is that when you're listening to native English speakers speaking English at their natural speed, you will develop your listening comprehension. Okay, because when they're speaking, they might not be using the same kind of pauses that we do. Okay, so if you listen to their conversation at their speed, that's going to be slightly different. So you want to make yourself acquainted to those practices. Okay, so understanding a recording is harder than understanding a video, because there aren't the same context clues available. So sometimes, so therefore, reading, watching, and listening, all of these things are essential. So when you're trying to build your skills, don't only rely on watching videos or watching movies, okay, because those will be helpful, but only to a certain extent. You also need to be able to just listen and comprehend without the video, because we take certain cues from the video as well, like how the person is speaking and how they are explaining and all of that. So don't restrict yourself to just videos. Specifically listen to podcasts, okay, because podcasts are better for listening comprehension practice. So we looked at, even in IELTS that is judged, and even at TOEFL it is judged. So ensure that you're listening. So at whatever stage you are, if you've started preparing or even if you're just planning, ensure, get yourself into the habit of listening to podcast, okay. So in one of my another videos that we did on English communication, I discussed how you can make listening podcast as a daily habit. All you have to do is just patch it up with the existing habit that you're already doing. Maybe having breakfast, make cooking, cleaning, whatever existing activity that you're already doing, just patch it up with this new activity. However, the important aspect here is that you should, at the end of it, so when you listen to the entire thing, you need to be very intentional about it, right? We're not just listening it for the heck of it, for putting a take that, what, I listened to the podcast today. That is not what the objective here is. The objective is to be able to improve your listening abilities, right? Your listening comprehension practice. For that, it is important that at the end of the day, you do a little bit of self-assessment. Ask yourself certain questions. In what context was this particular policy discussed? In what context was this news item being delivered today? What are the larger repercussions? Okay, so you can do a little self-assessment of yourself. If you're not enrolled in a course, of course, when you take a course there, all of this becomes a part of your learning, okay. The institution takes a responsibility, and there are a lot of practice tests that are given to you on all these different capacities, right? But however, if you're doing it on your own, then ensure that you have devised a certain mechanism to assess yourself at whatever stage you are, okay. So even if you're just starting out, maybe you want to, every time you listen to a podcast, you just want to give like 2 minutes break and maybe summarize the podcast, whatever you heard, to a friend, or maybe just to yourself only, or determine what were the important questions that was discussed in this podcast, right? Also, you need to learn to type fast. That is going to be a huge game changer. So typically people, if you test your current typing speed, it could be around 30 to 40 words in a minute. Ideally, you should aim for reaching at 65 to 75. Okay, if it is 65 and 75, you're going to save a lot of time typing your answers, and you don't want to waste a lot of time there. So work on your speed, your writing speed. At the same time, you should also work on your reading speed. We have another video on our channel, 𝗆𝗍. You can watch. This was taken by Abhyuday, and as to how somebody can improve their reading speed, right? So you first is that you start timing yourself, understand at what level you are, and in the video he has comprehensively discussed different ways that you can adopt to improve your reading speed. All right, because all of these two things I think are critical, even if you're not appearing for LLM. Okay, so even if, let's say, you're just working on your English, just working on improving your English language, this will be very helpful. So at a lot of times when you're assigned a task at a law firm, or while working as an intern, maybe sometimes it happens that students take a lot of time in finishing that task, and that happens because they're reading very slow. Their comprehension of what they are expected to read, like let's say if I ask somebody to prepare a case note on a judgment, one student, let's say, is able to complete the activity in 30 minutes, and the other student might be taking a lot longer to finish the activity. And this happens because your reading ability is not that fast. So reading and typing is something that you should constantly look at improving at whatever level you're working. Just taking few questions from the chat. Suruchi is asking that if she wants to apply for a college in a specific country, do we still have to know the accent of all the countries that you have mentioned? No, no, no. So this is pertaining to the college that you're applying. Okay, to the country that you're applying. I'm giving more examples so that it suits the audience. So if I am applying, let's say at Australia, then I should be familiar with the Australian accent of English. Okay, so whichever country that you're applying to, right? Mukesh is asking that sometimes what I do is that I listen to the English and then translate it in my mind and then translate the answer and speak it. It sometimes causes significant delay in replying. Can this be solved as well? Yes, definitely. And this is very important, Mukesh. You know why it happens is because we are listening in English, but we are not thinking in English. Okay. We are able to think in our own language only. Okay. So it is very important that you are listening in English and thinking in English. So both these things need to be developed. So I understand that maybe at the current level, what you are doing is that you're listening something in English and then translating it. However, what you need to look at or focus at is develop ways where you're not translating. Okay, so you can do this first in informal settings and then practice then in a more formal settings. So maybe let's say when you're having a conversation with a friend, instead of replying in your native language, you stick to English throughout the conversation. You don't jump off to your native language to explain a particular term. Now, when you're just starting out, you might be very slow in your expression. Okay, you might not be able to speak at a particular speed. You might be very slow because you're trying to think and then you're trying to speak. So the entire process might be slow at the beginning, but that's fine. The important thing is that you are having an entire conversation in English. Okay, so that will help you in saving time. Similarly, let's say you heard a podcast and you want to just identify what were the key issues that was discussed in today's audio. How do you go about this? Instead of answering yourself in your native language, do it in English, even if it takes slightly more time. Okay, but that will help you. So instead of maybe identifying 4 points, you stick to identifying only 1 point. But that 1 point, that entire understanding of it happens in English. So even the thinking happens in English, and when you're making yourself understand, that also happens in English. All right. Does that help you? Mukesh, do you think will that be helpful? Aditya is asking that do we have to get academic IELTS for LLM? Do we have to give academic or the general IELTS for LLM? Generally, it's academic, but you can follow if there is a otherwise guideline depending upon the university that you're applying. Mostly, it's academic only. Mukesh is asking how to make the level of your English speaking skills more sophisticated. Okay, so largely this is not lacking in a lot of students is because they're not using the words that they are coming across every day in their life. Okay, so one basic reason, so you will see there are a lot of people who are able to have basic conversations. Okay, but as we proceed towards the more complex issue, that is the point where they find it difficult to speak in English. So if it's just about, how are you, how's the weather, how is your day, they can have these lighter conversations. But if I tell them that, how do you think the IP assignment clause needs to be negotiated for the contract, they might find it very difficult to articulate their thoughts on that area. So for that, what you need to do is you need to start developing an attitude wherein you are constantly engaging yourself in making such conversations. Now, how do you do that? So depending upon the field that you're working on, let's say you are required to work on IP matters. Number one is that you start immersing yourself in such complex discussions. So let's say if you're trying to you're exposing yourself only to television. Okay, you're listening basic podcast, you're watching movies, then your ability to have complex conversations is going to be very limited. Okay, so what you need to do is you have to make a switch and listen to more complex items. Okay, probably a policy discussion, probably a judgment analysis, Okay, something wherein they're more deeply focused on discussing the subject matter that you're working on, so that you get acquainted with the terminology, the vocabulary, you get acquainted with the kind of expression, you get familiarized with the sentence structuring. Now here writing also plays a very crucial role. Okay, so you can experiment that for yourself. Start writing on complex issues, right? So let's say if you want to pursue IPR in future, you can pick up complex topics, okay, and then start writing articles that will at least familiarize you with the vocabulary and the sentence structuring. Okay, and then you can start building your conversations also on that particular topic. I hope that answers your question, Mukesh. Suruchi is asking something like the Michelle Obama podcast on Spotify or Jay Shetty. I got a score of 550 or 7.5 in IELTS, but my listening skills only 536. Okay, so to improve more, should I listen to more and more complex language? Exactly. Complex as well as diverse subjects. So maybe one day you're listening to a policy matter, the other day, let's say you're listening to history, the other day, maybe you're listening to something that's on art. Okay, so what happens is, see, if you restrict yourself to only one kind of audio formats, your understanding of subjects will be very limited, and also you're constantly listening to one person. So let's say if I'm only listening to Jay Shetty on Spotify, that means I can only understand Jay Shetty speaking. If somebody else starts speaking, I might take a lot more time to comprehend his or her conversations, right? Therefore, expose yourself to different audio clips, and do not restrict yourself only to one person. Okay, also in terms of subject matter, so it should be from different categories, right? And also the kind of people that you're listening, that also needs to be from different categories. I hope that answers your question. Moving further on strategies, so we discussed a few of things that you can adopt. Now the others are, number one could be, so I'm going to divide them into different categories, right? Reading. So as I discussed, that change your usual resources. So let's say if you're only reading every day, let's say you're reading the Indian Express newspaper, change that. Okay, don't restrict to only one type of newspapers or one type of novels, one type of genre. That's very dangerous thing to do, because tomorrow if I put you to a new situation, you'll find difficult to navigate, even though you're reading every day, right? But if you're not changing your sources, it will be a difficult practice. Okay, of course, reading anything is better than not reading at all. So maybe you want to first pick up with your interest areas. All right, but however, if you really want to ace your reading skills, you have to get out of your comfort zone and expose yourself to varied formats. Okay, so don't only restrict yourself to novels. Maybe sometimes just pick poetry, for example, for reading. Okay, so experiment with genres, experiment with authors, even so the newsletter, the kind of newsletters that you've subscribed to, maybe from now and then you would want to change that as well, right? Expose yourself to a larger material that's available, right? So that's I think a major game changer when it comes to improving your reading skill. Second is entirely dependent on your self assessment. How well are you assessing? Okay, so maybe you would want to give yourself exercises of completing the sentence. So let's say you read a page of a book and then you want to see, are you able to recall what you read on the first page? Are you like if you just put your hand and then are you able to complete the sentence? This is how we were tested when we were kids, right? When we were taught English initially. So similarly, you also need to do that with complex subjects, just to understand if you're able to remember what you're reading. Okay, if you're not doing self assessment, there is no way of understanding whether your language is improving or not. Okay, so it's very essential that you're constantly working on improving your reading listening abilities, and for that you're constantly doing a self assessment. Then only the entire exercise will be helpful. Another thing is that you can try speed reading. Okay, both the things. Okay, speed writing and speed reading. So generally, if you like if you read quickly for 30 seconds and then read the paragraph again to check whether or not there was key information that you did not understand because of your reading speed. So you can, this is how you can test. So you read at a particular speed to see what is your current level, at what level you are currently, and then maybe try and increase and see how much are you still able to comprehend. Okay, so this way what will happen is little by little your speed will improve. Okay, so reading quickly does take practice. Okay, but remember that it should not be done if you're not able to understand what you're reading. So understanding, so it's not like that, you read an entire paragraph but you're not able to grasp anything out of it. So both of the things are important, that you're at reading as quickly as possible, but at the same time are also able to understand what you have read. Okay, for this, again, self-assessment is important. If you're not assessing yourself, you will never be able to know whether you're able to grasp what you have read or not. Okay, you will not be able to understand at what level you are. Okay, so Ruchi is asking, what role do reading and speaking skills play in the test? So like I told you, Suruchi, they are very important in the test. Now both your TOEFL and your IELTS mark you on your writing and speaking abilities. Okay, so these two things are important. At TOEFL, both writing and speaking have equal weightage. Okay, 30 pointers are devoted to that. Okay, so it's very important. I mean, equal weightage is given to all of the components: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. All right. So this was with respect to reading. Again, I'm just quickly re-emphasizing. You need to first change your usual resources that you're referring to. Okay, you need to constantly evaluate yourself, assess yourself. Where are you at? Whether you're improving, you're not improving, how is it going? Assessment is important. And then you're constantly challenging yourself to read faster. Okay, 3 things with respect to reading. Okay, now coming to listening. Now, how do you improve your listening abilities? So number 1 is you get familiar with different accents. So let's say you're able to understand British accent quickly, but when it comes to Australian accent, you struggle. So you need to, since you're listening to all of this, you need to assess yourself with different accents that you're exposing yourself to. Okay, if you still find certain accents difficult, then you need to focus more on that. Okay, so you will get plenty of material on YouTube and Spotify where you can find audio recordings in different accents, right? So you need to see which ones are you finding difficult. For somebody, let's say Irish accent is difficult for a few people to understand. You want to check at what level you are, what is your comprehension level when it comes to that, right? Again, keep changing the subject of your podcast, expose yourself to more complex and varied topics. Then the another important thing that you can practice is transcribe exactly what you heard. So this is also given. So when you're doing when you're if you have enrolled in an institution to prepare for these tests, at that time also, you're required to give practice test. So this is something that you can follow for yourself also here. Okay, when you've heard the entire transcript, when you've heard the entire audio, just try and transcribe it. Okay, try and write the entire thing instead of writing it on a notepad. Do it on the laptop. That will also help in improving your writing skills. Okay, transcribing will test how well are you familiarized with the concept and how far are you able to remember what you just heard. Okay, so you should also test your writing ability. So what you can do is maybe you can experiment writing to different people, because the kind of language that you use in different context will be different. Like, let's say if I ask you to write a letter to a younger sibling, the kind of language that you will be using will be different, right? And if I ask you to write a letter to maybe to your grandmother or grandfather, again, the kind of language that you will use will be different. You'll be way more respectful in your vocabulary, in your sentence framing, right? As opposed to if you're writing to a friend or to someone younger to you, you would want to adopt to a different kind of a language. Similarly, let's say if you're writing to a colleague or a boss or a mentor, you'll adopt to a more formal style of writing. So acquaint yourself to all these different formats and styles of writing. Okay, don't only always learn how to write formal business emails. Okay, even informal communication is equally important, right? And also the ability to address different age groups. All right, different age groups, people from different backgrounds, right? Then you should also experiment with advanced grammar structures. Okay, so what happens is that our daily writing needs are often limited to maybe just typing on WhatsApp, maybe responding to friends or family or our colleagues on WhatsApp, or maybe emails, right? We do not write in a more complex setting, that is maybe writing an op-ed or writing a case analysis or writing a white paper, writing a research paper, right? So you want to expose yourself to different formats of writing, and also be aware of a more advanced grammar structures, right? Follow patterns like, when to use past tense, future tense, progressive tense, conditional statements, commands. All of that you need to be more careful about, right? So next time you write something like this, try remembering some of the more advanced grammar that you have learned, like the examples in what I just mentioned, okay, and try and use that. So maybe you're trying to give a command to someone, or maybe you're trying to make conditional statements, right? You can also challenge yourself with new vocabulary. Now, how do you improve your vocabulary is so on an everyday basis, you are listening to a lot of new words, right? You might be coming across a lot of new words. You need to keep making a list of them and then start using them in your everyday language. If you're not using them, nothing's going to help, right? So with vocabulary, the important aspect is that whatever new that you're learning, you should be able to incorporate in your daily life. Then only it's going to be helpful. Otherwise, you're going to hit a snag, and that's not going to help your purpose. All right. So I think this was it from my end when it came to specific strategies with respect to how to develop your reading, writing, listening, and speaking abilities. Any questions, if you have, you can please ask me. Okay, so there is one person who's asking that they are able to understand while speaking, but while doing the conversation, they find it difficult. So maybe you can start practicing the conversations in a more informal setting first, and then move to a more formal settings. All right. So try that. Okay. And depending on that, you'll be able to eventually improve yourself. So you first start by informal settings, and then start having conversations. Even if it's basic conversations, start having them in a more formal settings. So the more you expose yourself to different scenarios, the better you get at communication. Suruchi is asking which is the better test to get, IELTS or TOEFL. So this will also depend upon your university, which university is asking for which score. All right, sometimes they ask for both of them, sometimes they ask particularly for one score. So it will also depend on that. Otherwise, so while practicing, okay, you would want to, a good strategy is that you appear for both, and in whichever you score better, you put that score in your application. Okay. So you appear for both the tests, and in whichever you're able to score better, you put that score. TOEFL, I find, is comparatively more easier than IELTS in my personal experience. Okay. So you can put whichever. So ideally, you should give both these tests and then pick up your score and then put it in the application. Jojit is saying that I can listen at a good pace, but find it difficult to make notes speedily. How to improve this writing ability? So for this, you'll have to experiment slightly. Okay. When I say experiment, you can draw. So for some people, they don't need to necessarily write word to word. Okay. Even drawing helps them in understanding. So notes are very personal to people. Okay. What might work for me might not work for you. So those are very personally written. But however, a couple of things is, so try and see that what will enable you to recall this particular word, okay, or a particular concept. Like for instance, let's say from this entire conversation that we had today, you want to remember that it is important for you to check different sources, unusual sources. So maybe if I just take down this word, unusual sources, I will be able to understand that unusual sources, I need to follow this in my reading comprehension, I need to follow this in my listening ability. So whichever word rings the bell in your head, right? So that's how some people use that technique. Okay, you'll have to figure it out maybe in settings, so you can experiment, you can test for yourself. So maybe when you're listening to a podcast or when you're listening to a movie, you want to try different styles. Maybe one of the styles could be writing word to word, the other could be maybe using drawing wherever you can, and see what is enabling you to remember better. Okay, for me particularly, what I do is I do that the way we write our head notes. So we write one word, then we put a dash, then we write a one word, then we put a dash. Typically that's how we do a head note for a case. So that helps me in remembering, and that's a strategy that I follow. Sometimes I also put it in pointers, that also helps. Yes, for some people, keywords and flowcharts are very helpful. So instead of so they don't even write keywords, okay, they just draw flowcharts. For some people, that works very efficiently, but not in my case. Okay, I need more words than images to remember. It can be anything for you. Okay, it could be keywords, flowcharts, combination of both. You'll that is why practicing is important. So you experiment and see what is working better for you. All right. Does anybody have any further questions? Anything? All right. So I think with this, we can wind up today's session. I would also like to mention that at 𝗨𝗪𝗂, we also have our course on English communication that also enables students for preparing for their LLM, right? The course is targeted. The course is targeted to improve your English communication in general. If anybody who wants to know more about the course, they can reach out to me. I'm putting down the number here for all of you, right? Okay, so if you have any queries with respect to the course, you can reach out to me. And thank you everyone for attending today's session. Whatever feedback you have for me, if you liked today's session, if you found it useful, you can leave in your comments in the chat box. Quick check, what is the most important thing that you learned from today's class? Anything. This will also check how far can you remember. Anything that you found useful from what we have discussed. One key takeaway from today's class. Oh, that's great. That's great. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. I hope the session was useful. Okay, I'm just putting it out again. Yeah, sorry. All right. Thank you.